Okay. Welcome, Sadie. We're really excited to have you here.
Thank you, Monica. I'm sorry, I'm having one of those like technological moments where I thought that this was going to do one thing and it's doing a different thing. So I'm going to pull it up so that you see my face. And actually, oh dear, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Whoops. And she just left. Technology.
Oh, it's such fun. It is such fun.
We're not.
What will we do about it?
This is true.
Let me see. That would be.
Yeah. Is this Ellie?
Yes, hi.
Hi, good to see you. Our speaker was on and was trying to change her screen and she got off. So she'll be back. So
Great.
It's called, what's the pandemic taught us? Patience, patience, and patience.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, well, you get me and no slideshow. So I am not going to be so sorry about that. It's not working the way I thought it would. So anyway, I would love to go around and learn everybody's names. Can we do that? I'm sorry, it was a little bit of a technological fumble there from the beginning, but I would love to know who everybody is.
I'll start. So, and then I will just call on everybody. And you can tell us just your name and one interesting thing about yourself. So, and I'm Monica, you all know me, Director of Client Services at CRC, and we're super excited to have Sadie with us. So, Patricia.
I'm Patricia Spino, and I'm a breast cancer survivor.
Okay, and Diane?
I'm Diane Kahneman. I have a grandson who just graduated from high school and a granddaughter who's just 3 years old.
Okay, Lynn.
I'm Lynn, also a breast cancer survivor, and I have two grandsons, 3 and 6, and they're boys, and I had girls, so it's a whole different world for me, but loving it.
Okay, Sheila.
My name is Sheila, and I am a uterine and ovarian cancer survivor.
And Barbara?
Barbara Schramm, multiple myeloma, and I'm going to go put my feet in the sand in a couple of weeks.
Ooh.
I think.
Carol.
I'm Carol. I'm an appendix cancer survivor, and I love riding my bike when I feel well enough to do it.
Very good. Sharon?
Hi, I'm Sharon Kaplan. I'm the Director of Volunteers at CRC, and I have a dog who loves water more than anything else, and here he is. In a muddy puddle.
And Ellie.
Hi, I'm Ellie, and I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I have a husband who's dealing with kidney cancer.
All right. Well, thank you guys all for sharing your names with me. It's great to know just a little bit about your backgrounds. I would love to, well, I'll start by saying my name's Sadie Hayes, and I'm originally from New Mexico. I'm from Albuquerque, which is where I did my master's degree in acupuncture and oriental medicine. And I've been in Ithaca since 2008. And in that time, let's see, I have 2 kids. They're 11 and 8 years old, and they're both boys, and I only have a sister, so I know what you mean. It's a whole different thing than what I grew up with. And part of my reason for wanting to learn more about doing acupuncture in the care of people who are getting treatment for cancer is that cancer has touched my family and my friends a lot. Like my aunt and my both of my grandparents on my dad's side and my great aunt. Like there's just a lot of people in my life who have been affected by cancer in one way or another. And I did a program through Memorial Sloan Kettering Hospital in 2012, I think, where it was like a pretty substantial program. They have, I mean, I don't know if anybody's going to Sloan Kettering for their care, but I was really impressed with how they approach integrative medicine and oncology, and a great program for teaching acupuncturists how we can be effective allies in helping people go through their cancer treatment. So helping people with one form or another of mostly like side effects from cancer treatment, either chemo or radiation or surgery, post-surgery. It's been some part of my practice, not usually like the bulk of it, but at least some active part of my practice really since 2013. So I've been practicing acupuncture for about 15 years now. And one of the reasons I like doing acupressure is because another big why for me and why I do what I do is that I feel like medicine should really be a thing that comes back to us and how we take care of ourselves. And so I love when I'm able to work with people, find out more what's going on with them, and then use what I do in a way that turns it around so the tools are in your hands, right? I mean, not everybody wants to do acupuncture on themselves. I don't really love doing acupuncture on myself, but giving ourselves, acupressure or massage, I think somebody just did aromatherapy, right? Those are things that when you learn a little bit of a thing and how it intersects with your body, then you grow in your own power and your understanding in yourself. And so rather than being the person who fixes things for people, I really want to be a person who's helping people understand themselves better and sort of connecting tools into your hands. So that's what I love to do. So I mentioned pain, anxiety, headaches, fatigue. I would really love to know what is active for this particular group of people. Like, what are things that would be really helpful for y'all to know? Because I could talk theoretically about things, but it would be much more relevant for everybody, I think, if there are some, specific situations, or maybe without, if you don't feel comfortable getting into your own personal stuff, that's fine. But when we talk about headaches or pain, you could have pain everywhere in your body, and acupuncturists use points all over the place to deal with different kinds of pain. So if we have a couple of buckets of things that, besides what I mentioned that you want to make sure we address, I'm totally happy to alter my presentation to be relevant to the people who are here today. So does anybody have anything besides what I mentioned? I put anxiety, headaches, pain. Are there other things going on?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, what's up, Carol?
I have major stomach problems. I have frequent diarrhea. I've lost a lot of weight that I can't gain back. I have a lot of pain. I had a colon resection, and it may be partly related to that. I don't know for sure.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm
So stomach pain and diarrhea. Yeah.
And just feeling generally sick as a result.
Right. Yeah. Anybody else have any? Thank you. Is anybody, what's up?
I was an acupuncturist for a couple of years out in California, and it was just great. And I went to him with a rash from ear to ear.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I'd seen dermatologists, and all they could recommend was antibiotics, which made it worse. And I saw him for a couple treatments, and the rash was gone, and he continued. He was trained in England. And he was excellent. So I have a little understanding of the medians or meridians or whatever.
Yeah.
And my chiropractor used the same thing, kinesiology and stuff here. So I have a little understanding of that. I don't know if you're going to go by that
Yeah, I was going to give a little bit of an introduction, but see if,
Yeah, but,
like, I wasn't going to talk about GI stuff, and I think that, it's really helpful
oh,
to
I've
know
got
that.
GI too, so.
Yeah, okay. All right, so maybe we'll include that. Do headaches feel like a relevant thing for people? Is that a relevant topic? Thumbs up, thumbs down?
Well, right now I'm dealing with an adrenal issue, but
Okay.
it's
Okay, so a little more
bad
endocrine.
for the time being,
So-
till we find out exactly what's going on.
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, Diane?
I have neuropathy in my fingers.
Yeah.
I emailed you and
Yeah.
you said it may help, it may not.
Yeah.
I'd
So
like to-
I'll talk about neuropathy for sure. Is that an active concern for some other people?
Yeah,
Little bit.
yeah.
Yeah,
I
neuropathy.
also have it in my abdomen.
Yeah,
I
okay.
think that's what the GI doctor thought, that the pain was pretty much neuropathy. I
Oh,
don't
yeah.
know. We don't know. So,
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Richie? You're muted.
You're muted, Richie. Hey, Richie.
I am Carol's husband, the person who's now writing something in her little notebook. And I'd like to support her with about anxiety around this whole, all of her pain and discomfort.
Sorry, I muted. My friend is helping me clean, so she was vacuuming. Okay, so I feel like that gives us a good place to start.
pain is the main thing.
Pain, anxiety. Yeah. Okay. All right. So a little bit of experience from Pat with acupuncture. There's a lot that can be said about the history of acupuncture. It's like thousands of years old. It's from China. When I think about acupuncture, I think of it more like a hand. And acupuncture is the thumb that makes Chinese medicine distinct, just like a thumb is what makes primates distinct, right? Like acupuncture is pretty novel. But the other parts of Chinese medicine are herbal medicine and nutrition, like dietetics. We also practice body work. So there are things like Tui Na or cupping therapy that are part of Chinese medicine, as well as breathing and energy cultivation practices like Tai Chi, Qigong, practices and meditation. So when somebody practices Chinese medicine, we really have this whole handful of tools that we can use. If somebody's coming just for acupuncture, that's cool, right? That's a very useful tool. But often when I'm working with someone, I'm thinking, what are the other things we can be doing to really work on sort of comprehensive lifestyle picture? And so so the body work and acupuncture is where acupressure fits, right? It's body work with hands, not needles. So in order to understand acupuncture and like why you would use certain channels, it's helpful just to know that in Chinese custom from many millennia ago, it was not typical that people would do autopsies. It was very important that people inter their relatives when they die in complete form. So people were not performing a lot of like open abdominal surgeries. So there were lots of very interesting pictures about what people sort of imagined or understood, their best sort of understanding of what the internal environment of a human body was. And it's from that, which has since developed, that we get an idea of 12 main organs. And those organs get linked up to a sort of external network of channels or meridians. So when somebody says, like, I'm working on your liver meridian, but it's on your toe, that might not make a lot of sense, right? But you can sort of think as though those meridians are like a telephone line to reach your liver and be like, hey, liver, what's up? Oh, you're feeling kind of cranky today. It's okay, I'm going to put spleen on the phone. Spleen, talk to liver. You guys are having a conversation here. So we're putting the organs in touch with each other via the channels, and on those channels accessing points. That kind of makes sense?
Mhm.
Yeah, so mostly it makes sense because the liver is a liver that we can understand. The kidneys, we have names for that. There are a couple of organs that are not actually organs, and that can get kind of confusing. Like there's a pericardium, but that's actually a structure, not an organ. And then we have something called the triple heater, which is sort of a abstract concept and less of like an actual distinct anatomical thing that you have. So that's where we have to understand that organs in Chinese medicine are as much about a sphere of influence in your body and a kind of energy that your body has. So like I work with somebody who had her spleen removed, but I still work on her spleen channel, or I work on people who've had their gallbladders taken out for gallstones, but they still have a gallbladder channel. So that's where we can talk about organs, but we have to make like a little, maybe you could call it like one has a capital G gallbladder and the other is a little g gallbladder. Like they have the same name, but they don't always have the same function from the two different systems. So it can be a little confusing. But when I refer to points like gallbladder 41, it mostly has to do with the fact that it's on a channel that has a relationship to an organ, but doesn't necessarily mean that the organ has a problem to work on the channel. Does that make sense? So like you could have a point on the heart channel or on the small intestine channel, but that doesn't automatically mean that you have like a problem going on in the heart. You're just working on that channel, because sometimes points are not just about reaching organs, they're about working in a sort of distinct like musculoskeletal area. So if you had pain in your back, we might be working on the bladder channel, but that doesn't really have anything to do with your actual bladder. Okay, so you don't want to be like thrown off course by the name. That's kind of actually in Chinese, like if I were to have learned my point location in China, there are 365 points and they all have different names. So for modern Chinese learning, they'll just say it's this number on this channel and it relates to an organ. But if you were to learn like 200 years ago, you'd have to learn all the individual names of the different points, and they wouldn't have necessarily been connected. Like they wouldn't have been named after the channel. So it's a much easier system to just be like, oh yeah, that's bladder 30, 31, 32, 33, because then they're in a sequence and it kind of tells you where on the body they are. So that's just a little bit about those. The other thing that I think is helpful to know is that, you know, I'm a white person practicing Chinese medicine, but I don't just practice Chinese medicine. I've also studied I went to Vietnam where they adopted Chinese medicine and kind of did their own thing with it. I've learned from Japanese teachers. I've learned from people who practice Korean style acupuncture. So Chinese medicine went into a region and has been shifted and changed. So the way that Japanese practitioners work is very different from how Chinese practitioners work. So it's actually kind of more accurate to call it East Asian medicine. Oriental is not a word that's so favored anymore. But East Asian medicine is a pretty accurate, it's traditional East Asian medicine. And when I'm working, sometimes I use Korean style acupuncture and sometimes I use Japanese style acupuncture. So there are a lot of different ways to approach it from those different traditions. Okay. So the second part of my introduction to this is like, what makes an effective acupuncture point? You know, we've got 365 points and they're all over the front and the back of your body. They're up on your head and your hands and your back and your legs. But how do you know which one to find? And there's a feeling that people have when a point is active. Like if you push on it, you might notice a kind of dull or achy or heavy sensation on that point. And that is a good thing. That's a desirable thing. If it's like painful, it's not good. But a dull, heavy, achy sensation is what we would call a qi sensation. And the qi is the word for the energy that's like moving along through those meridians. So if you have that qi sensation, that's fine. Especially on some points, we want to feel that. And especially if you're doing acupressure, it's better to have some sort of perceptible feeling that there's something going on there. If you don't, that's okay too. But if you're feeling like, wow, that's kind of achy, Well, it turns out that you might not be aware that there are all these achy spots all over your body, but as soon as you find out where those points are and you start poking around, it's like, oh yeah, that's an acupuncture point. And a lot of acupuncture points have a tenderness to them that's not like tender in the way that you would be, sitting down being like, oh man, like my arm's really hurting because like I banged it or I've got a bruise. It's a kind of achy that you notice once you start rubbing on it or putting pressure on it. So that's a pretty common experience that people have. So does anybody have any questions so far? Yeah, what's up, Carol?
You were saying that the Chinese were guessing at things from outside the body, not doing autopsies. So as people learn more, how accurate did it turn out to be, and has it changed?
Some of those pictures are really interesting. Like, they look like you just look at the pictures of what they imagine the internal organs to be, and it would be like, these like blossoming flower type shapes. It was very interesting. I mean, mostly pretty correct. I mean, they would have also had like, gory battles and stuff where they would have seen people's innards and, there's like, there would have been opportunities, but they weren't. It wasn't really until the 1700s came around, and there was a lot more interface between China and Korea, or China and Japan and Europe, with people traveling back and forth, where there was a little more interest in doing autopsies. So things, I mean, and that's like Chinese medicine's like 2,000 plus years old. So by the time, I mean, that's like 1700s. The amount of time that Western medicine has been around is like very short compared to Chinese medicine. But in that time, Chinese medicine has made a significant number of changes and modernizations, so that the kind of Chinese medicine that's practiced, say, in hospitals now in China is very modern. In fact, in the hospital that I was training in actually in both Vietnam and in China, in Hanoi and Beijing, they have, you do your check-in on the bottom floor, and you get all your blood work done, you get your imaging done, and then you go up and you see your acupuncturist, and then you go into the other room and you see your herbalist, and you go downstairs and maybe you get an MRI. I mean, the whole thing is like, we would call it integrative medicine, right? But it's just how traditional medicine and Western medicine have grown up, because people use traditional medicine and use it effectively in those places. So they're really like, it's not antiquated anymore. It's developed quite a bit. And now there are, wonderful national organizations for research and stuff like that. So, but that is just to say that some of the structures we talk about, like the Sanjiao, the triple heater, it's like it harkens back to a time when it was a pre-autopsy, right? Where so some of it stayed in the concepts. So we talked a little bit about like how to find points. So the dull, achy feeling that you might feel on a point, that to me says this point is active. This point would like a little bit of attention. The second question is, how are you going to sort of treat that point, or how are you going to give it some pressure? And that is a thing that's between you and your body, right? It's going to feel right for you. So sometimes, like if I have a headache, I might just want to hold a point like super gently. Like it's not even, I'm hardly pushing on it. I'm just putting my finger on it the way that you might put your finger on a straw if you were going to try to put a finger like a straw in water and pull up a little bit of water. It's just having your finger on your hand. Sometimes you might want to push in a little bit harder. Sometimes if things are really painful, we want to just wail on it and press really deeply. I think part of how you treat a point has to do with the feedback you get from your body, but also the nervous system state that you want to create in your body. So sometimes if you're feeling fatigued, it's helpful to do a kind of patting. And so you can do a patting. Sometimes people call it self-slapping, which I don't really love that idea. But so patting has a way of drawing energy up to the surface of your body. So if you're feeling kind of like slow and sluggish, it's a great way to stimulate it. Sometimes you can just use brushing, and brushing might be really calming. So in that same vein, if you're finding, for instance, with anxiety, that you are feeling tense and anxious, I would have your finger be the thing that helps you remember to calm yourself. And so that's where we can bring in something like breathing, where you might practice a type of breathing in addition to a kind of pressure that helps you shift your nervous system state. Because if you're anxious, but you're also just like pushing and pushing and pushing on your body and you're trying to get yourself to calm down, that's not really going to help you calm down, right? That's just going to make you feel more tense. So, so when you're treating yourself, you're kind of like, okay, I'm feeling tense. What do I want to bring in? I want to bring in feeling more calm. Okay, so then your finger needs to help you bring in that calm. And so that might be a really soothing touch. Like if you can imagine, you know, the kind of thing you would do to somebody you love dearly. You know, if they're feeling very tense and upset, then you're just going to rub them really nice and gently, right? Whereas if you're kind of like got somebody who's kind of sluggish, it's like, come on, like wake up, wake up, wake up, right? And so you kind of bring that energy to yourself, but then you apply it to your body. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I think, you know, we don't want to wail on ourselves or like create more tension with how we're using our hands, because then you just end up hurting your forearm muscles and you need a massage. So that's not better. So I think the place, just because neuropathy came up, no, okay, sorry, I'm gonna bookmark neuropathy. So let's start with a little warm up. You ready to do something with me?
Sure.
Okay. For people, how comfortable is it to reach down to your knees? Can you reach to your knees okay?
Oh, sure.
Good. Can you reach to the bottoms of your feet okay? Is that okay? All right. So I'm gonna flip you around and put myself on a stool. Hold on a sec. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna do a little warm up, and this is something that I would encourage you to do if you are feeling a little bit on the droopy, just waking up side of things. And so this is a Qigong practice that I learned from my Qigong teacher, Robert Peng. And I like to do this sometimes in the morning. And so this does involve self-slapping or patting. But there are 3 places we're gonna sort of create pressure. One is in the armpit. And the reason we use the armpit, one, is for lymph, right? It's also the heart organ. Its first point is right at the armpit. So sometimes when we do a patting type exercise, we can imagine that we're like banging on a drum, but the drum is our body. And so anytime we're creating that pat, you can imagine like a ripple going through. So if you pat here, your contact is here, but there's a little ripple that comes across to your chest. So when you're patting here, you can kind of imagine like, wake up, heart, like just kind of wake it up. And you can imagine almost like you're just filling up a balloon or something with like just pumping a little bit of air into that. So we're just going to pat the underarm. So I feel it all the way over here in my chest when I pat. So go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we'll switch to the other side. And so this is just kind of like with a cupped hand. So you're just, I could never do that armpit squeaky thing that the boys did in elementary school. So this is the closest I can do. Just make a slapping sound in my armpit instead. So when we're patting, we're stimulating lymph movement, and we're stimulating our whole chest. So we kind of want this patting movement to reverberate and ricochet all around the chest cavity. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. Sit there. All right, so the next place is on the knee. So so your kneecap, here's the base of my knee. Show you. So at the base of your knee, if you put your knuckle there, you go down about a hand breadth down on the outside. So this is the tibialis anterior muscle. This is a very important point called stomach 36. And you don't have to get the exact location, but just to know that it's not at the knee and it's not way down here on the ankle. It's just about, see how the tibia bone comes up? You can follow the knee, the bone of your leg. And what you're gonna do here, you might feel around in there, might be a little achy. What you're gonna do here is karate chopping. And so when you're doing that, you can do it on both sides, but you're using the side of your hand here against this muscle. And the thing about this whole area is that this is the stomach channel. And so you don't want to go on the bone. There's not a lot there. So it's really sort of the first place once you get into that muscle where your hand is making contact with the muscle. And you can do that on both knees at the same time. So it would look kind of like this. So stomach 36 is a super important point. When I was again back to, I think it was in the hospital in Vietnam, I don't speak Vietnamese, I speak Chinese, but I couldn't speak to this one woman, but she was elderly and frail, and she told me I could do one needle on her through the translator. And I said, okay. And she said, one needle, you choose. And I was like, okay, I'll do stomach 36. And she gave me this look that was like, yeah, you picked the right one. So for stomach 36, we just do lots of chopping on stomach 36. You can also go down a little bit on your legs if you want and just activate that whole stomach channel. Stomach channel is important for your immune system, stomach 36 especially. It's also important for digestion. Okay, so that is the kind of acupressure that's really more like pounding. And so for the next pounding we're going to do, however you can reach the bottom of your foot. So here on the bottom of the foot, it's 1/3. You divide so there's the heel and the middle of the sole, and then there's the ball of your foot. Right there, sort of where the ball of your foot comes up to rise a little bit, 1/3 of the way down from your toes towards your heel. This point is called kidney 1. And this is a wonderful anchoring point. You use this point to really draw your energy down to sort of root your body. So if you're feeling a little flighty or a little anxious, you can even like tape a dime or something to this point and walk around on it so that you have feedback coming in from the root of your foot. And so this brings up a technique where you're not just pushing, right? You can do some rubbing on it. But right now what we're going to do is we're going to do patting again. So we're going to take our open palm, brace our foot with one hand, and take the palm and just give it some pressure. So you give it a nice firm pressure, kind of as if you were doing like, burping a baby or, just a nice pat. Not so much you're going to hurt, but enough so that there's a resonance. Okay, now just give your foot a little bit of a rub. Now this is kidney 1, and the kidney channel goes all the way up the inner leg and goes sort of into the torso on the front side, but the kidneys are really on the back, right? So when you're doing this, you can kind of imagine, again, that idea of a ripple just moving all the way up through your leg and into your low back. So when we go to the next side, I'm going to be imagining that this is traveling up my leg and kind of in and through my body right back here. So as I pat, I'm imagining like a ripple going whoosh. Okay. So one of the reasons that it's really important to stimulate all of these three regions is that the kidney is in charge of this, what we call the lower, you've heard me say the triple burner before, which is one of those organs. And the lower burner, what we call the lower jiao, is the region sort of from the belly button down. So this whole pelvic region. So that's governed by the kidneys, one of them. And so you're stimulating the kidneys to sort of energize this whole lower pelvic region. When we're working on the stomach channel, we're working to energize this whole midsection here. And when we're working on the heart point here, we're working to energize the chest. So by just whacking 25 times on your heart, your stomach channel, and your kidney 1, you've basically it's kind of like carbonating the water of these 3 different areas. You kind of like brought bubbly water and you brought life into it, right? In the way that, a waterfall like milk makes it look white and frothy, just because there's a lot of activity in there. So you're giving it activity, which is a great way to bring energy to these 3 regions. Sometimes after you've done something like these patting exercises, you might notice that your fingers, your hands might feel a little bit like a little tingly. Your feet might feel a little tingly, or they might feel awake. And that's a good sign. That's what we want. Does anybody have any questions from that?
I think you just answered it, but somebody asked how long do you do the slapping at any given point?
I go for like 25 repetitions, 30, just like for as much as you want until you feel kind of done with it. It's not an exact science. Yeah. Anything else? Is that the first time anybody's ever done something like that? Yeah. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
At one point you said there are a lot of points in a row, like there might be stomach 28, 29, 30, 31.
Mm-hmm.
If you're working on a given area, at our stage, do we have to know what other the other points that are right nearby, or just these just nice general places to make some effect?
Yeah, this is like, you don't need to know. One of the things that I'm going to talk about in our next section of points is really just knowing that when you're in a channel region, right? The channel, there are some points that are sort of like the big ones, sort of like the celebrity points, and
Yes.
they're well known, but they have neighbors who are doing things kind of similar to what they're doing. They're just the ones that got a lot of press, right? So you don't have to know all of their details. If you're working on the stomach channel, a lot of the stomach channel points are going to be helping with digestion to some degree or another. Some of them are just like super duper effective. So,
And there was another question about if you've had lymph nodes removed under your arm, is it okay to pat?
Well, so that's I would say that has a lot to do with how recently they were removed and how sort of tender the tissue feels, and what kind of instructions you've been given. Activating, if it feels more comfortable to do something that's a little bit more of like a pulsing activity, where you're just giving yourself a little pulse in the axilla region, that's fine, right? And if it's, certainly if it's been like recent, I would just go kind of minimal. But if it's been a while, unless you've been told otherwise, I don't think there's too much of a problem with it. Hello, Kim.
Another question?
Yeah, what's up?
Yes.
Any limit to how often you should do these things?
No, daily. Daily, a couple times a day, totally fine. When you're doing doing Qigong, I don't know if anybody's had experience with Qigong, but doing Qigong as a daily practice is incredibly energizing, and no harm in doing. You could do Qigong all day long. And you probably would just feel awesome. People might think you're on drugs because you're feeling great. I'm gonna switch around and sit in my, well, no, maybe this is a good seat. Maybe I'll just stay here. Okay, so we ready to jump into some like point specifics? Yeah, okay.
I think sounds good.
Great. So I'm gonna get visual aid. So I thought we could start off with let's start off with just talking about anxiety, since that's a thing that, especially this year, even if you don't consider yourself someone who feels anxiety, you probably had some anxiety this year. Anxiety in Chinese medicine, the way I think about anxiety is that it has a lot to do with, I think about the term anxiety as a frosting, and not a very delicious one, but the frosting is like an anxiety cake, but underneath that cake, or underneath that frosting, there are a lot of different feelings that people have. Some people have fear, some people have sort of repetitive worry, some people are actually excited, like they're really looking forward to something, but it turns out they're also feeling anxious. Sometimes people are anxious and also angry. So I think it's really helpful to know a little bit about what the emotions are going on behind the anxiety, because the second part of anxiety is that anxiety shows up in different people's bodies in lots of different places. And so some people feel anxious and they tense up their neck muscles, or maybe they get like TMJ or something. Some people feel anxious and their heart goes into like palpitations. Other people feel anxious and they feel it in the pit of their stomach. So anxiety as a term, I think, taps us into the fact that there's a state of unease, usually oriented towards a scary thing or uncomfortable thing that might happen now or in the future, right? But that doesn't really tell us where it's happening, where that uncomfortable thing is happening in your body, and what feelings you have behind that. So I'm going to go with two main areas that I see people usually having anxiety, kind of like having areas that are affected by anxiety. And one of them is the chest, right? A lot of times people talk about like a tight chest or a feeling of like, you know, suffocation happening in here. Going along with that, like sometimes heart palpitations, or you know, the feeling that your heart is beating, maybe even rapidly. Even if you were to like take your pulse, it might be feeling like a fine state. So when we're in the area of the chest, we're going to be working often with points that are on the arm, and that could be the lung, the pericardium channel, or the heart channel. And so usually when we're looking at channels, we've got 3 racing stripes that go along the outside and 3 racing stripes that go along the inside. And so the thumb side racing stripe is the lung, and the one that goes down the middle, we can get that out of the way. The one that goes down the middle is the pericardium, and that goes down to your middle finger. And then the one that's on the pinky side that goes to the pinky, that's the heart. Okay, so if you just know that lung channel is here, pericardium and heart are here in the middle and the outside, then that's going to tell you a lot of information, because if your heart area is feeling constricted, pericardium and heart are really good channels to choose from. If you have a cough, or if you're having a hard time breathing, or even if you're having allergies or something like that, it's going to be really good to go poke around and see what you can find on the lung channel. And the idea in Chinese medicine is that actually the areas farther away from our torso, so in the hand, are more effective. They're stronger points for treating close to the body issues. So a lot of times if I have a heart thing, rather than going and sticking needles in somebody's chest, I'm going to pick points that are far away anyway. And that's really useful for you as a person, because, you know, as like a treating yourself person, because that means you can find points that are on your own arm, really from the elbow down, and there are many useful places. So what I would do first would be to like, okay, if I know that like my chest is feeling tight and I am feeling anxious, I might just start by pressing down the line that corresponds with the pericardium. The way you know you're in pericardium territory, I don't know if you can see very well, but there are these two tendons that go right into here. You can sort of feel these little tendons. And between them, there's a vein, and there's the median nerve. And those two tendons are like where you would put C-bands if you got car sick. Anybody familiar with those? So that region there, that pericardium region, especially this point here, pericardium 6, that we'll talk about, this whole region, when people's emotional state, especially feelings of safety, security, trust, you know, in relationships, when that's feeling jeopardized, sometimes there are points that are active along here. So this is another thing about finding points. Where do points like to hang out? Points are kind of predictable, actually. They're not, they're kind of like fish in a stream. So you can find them in places like at crooks in the like little bends in the stream. So if this is a stream and it's coming down, you can imagine, oh, there's going to be water, and then it's going to eddy here for a minute before it continues going through. So anytime you see a flexy joint, you can be sure there's going to be points right around that area, right? So here's a flexy joint, heart 7, pericardium 7, lung 9, lots of points. Anytime there is a funny little crevice or a dip, right? Like here's a funny little thing. You know what they call this? They call this the anatomical snuff box. It's like crazy. Like, so if you have your snuff, you can just stick it there and, you know, anyway. So if you find little crevices and dips between bones, that's another really reliable place that you're going to find acupuncture points. So they like to hang out in cracks, like little creases and crevices. They like to hang out in funny dips and depressions. And then the other kind of place that you find is muscular prominences. So like if you squeeze your thumb towards your hand, you notice how the muscle kind of bulges up a little bit? Feel that a little bit? Well, that's large intestine 4. That's a spot. So the same thing, if you were to flex your extensor, or these extensors in your arm, there are all these like kind of, you know, like muscle bulge areas. Those places in muscle bodies, those are acupuncture points, right? They're usually, when they're done with dry needling, which is a practice that's essentially acupuncture, but other people do it, that is using a trigger point that makes your muscle go boink, 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 but it's in the muscle body. So so you can find it in crevices, you can find it in like little dips, and you can find it in muscle bulges. And then if you just know I've got like a middle channel and then one to the pinky side and one to the thumb side, you're working on a channel. They're just straight lines down an aspect of the body. So it's like, I want to just sort of take it and demystify some of it, because it's not, it can feel really like magical and mysterious. And it is kind of magical and mysterious, but it's also like vertical lines. So it's like, as long as you stay in a lane, you're going to be on a channel. So now that we know some places where chi hides, we're going to go right to that. So say our chest is feeling kind of tight. Well, here's a little flexy bendy spot, right? And we know that this pinky channel is the heart one. Well, what happens if we just take our pinky and we sink down, 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 little Taganic waterfall, and find ourselves in a pool at the base there? Is that kind of tender, Monica?
Yeah.
It's tender, isn't it? It's a super tender spot. And so that point, which you can find because if you bend your elbow and you kind of go towards the funny bone, it's about halfway in there. But basically, you just travel down, take your waterfall down, and end up in a little pool at the base. And that point is called heart 3. And the reason that it's heart 3 is because here's 1, and here's 2, and this is 3. So heart 3 is a wonderful point when your heart is beating out of rhythm. Like if it's feeling too fast, or if it's feeling like if you're actually just feeling it heartbeat and you don't want to, that I like to use heart 3 for that. The other cool thing you can do, you can kind of like reach around and do both of them at the same time. It's a little awkward, but you can find a way. There we go. That's a pretty good one. So I've got one thumb under here and one finger like that. Sort of work on both of them at the same time. So again, if I were doing this and I'm feeling anxious, I actually had a panic attack one time out of the blue at a friend's house. And I was like, what the heck is going on? And I stuck my feet up the wall and to get blood going in the right direction. And I just started working on heart 3, just like this. And I was like, oh yeah, like my breathing's kind of out of whack. And I did the next thing that I'm going to tell you, which is you double your exhale relative to your inhale, right? Because when you're breathing in a panicked way, you're taking short breath, and they're shallow. Take a nice deep breath to the count of 4. You can even hold it to the count of 7, and then let that thing go for the count of 8. And what you've done is you've laid a groundwork for helping shift yourself out of sympathetic overdrive, sympathetic nervous system state where you're in fight or flight, and move yourself into a parasympathetic state where you can actually feel safe, provided you are in a safe place, right? So in for the count of 4, you hold it to the count of 7, and out for the count of 8. While you're doing something like a nice gentle rub on heart 3, my guess is within 3 to 5 breaths, you should be in a different state. Pretty cool. Anybody have questions about that? No? So the next place I just want to show you on the heart channel, the other cool thing is that the body is the way that we find our own acupuncture points. So heart 8 for you is exactly where your pinky touches your palm when you make a fist. It's not where my pinky touches my palm, it's where yours does. So you go like this, you close your pinkies in, and there it goes. Now, when there's arthritis and it's hard to make a fist, maybe your pinky doesn't touch your palm so well. So you can kind of imagine it's where it would. But the place where that is you can't tell so much on a palm, but it is between bones, right? It's between the bones on the palm, usually kind of where these lines are, around where the lines are, right about there. And heart 8, it's another one of these points that if you were in a heart fluttery kind of situation, this would be a wonderful one to regulate your heart rate. So I'm just going to do it on the other side. Now here's a thing that's kind of funny. Like I'm working on the left side, and I'm like, dang, heart 8 is actually kind of sore on me today. It's interesting. I don't really know what it means. And then I go over on my right side and I'm checking it. Nothing. There's like nothing happening over there right now. And that's a really pretty common thing when I'm working on people and I'm poking over on one side and I check it on the other side and they're like, no, that's fine. But the other side is, the first side I work on, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so tender. So if I were to find a point, like maybe I'm trying to give myself some sort of treatment to calm my heart, I would pick the side that's more achy. because to me, that tells me there's a little bit more there to work with in the first place. So I tend to be a sort of hold and rub kind of acupressure for myself. So I might rub it around in little circles. That just feels good. So the last thing I'm going to talk about with anxiety is back to the pericardium channel, which we know is the one that goes in the middle and to the middle finger. So similarly, you could find pericardium made on your hand if you want to, just by folding the pinky. But we're going to keep traveling down to this spot here. And your way to find it is your 3 fingers from your wrist down between those 2 tendons. And that space between the 2 tendons, there's a lot of architecture happening in there. You got tendons, you've got the median nerve, you've got some vasculature. So it's always a little bit of a little bit exciting when we do acupuncture, because sometimes you get little electric zips down to your fingers. So if you're doing acupressure there and you're like, whoop, I feel kind of something zipping around in my hands, that's just your median nerve. If you don't like that feeling, you should back off. You don't want to do that too hard. This point is used, one, for chest-related issues, but this is chest-related broadly. So I would use this especially if the tightness in the chest is the main thing, right? Where you're feeling just that tight constraint. As opposed to the heart fluttery, this could be helpful too. But the reason we would use this point is also for things like you could use it if you're coughing. I've treated a couple of people for post-COVID symptoms who are still coughing. And I'm using this point because it's a chest opener. Regardless of if it's in the lungs or in the heart, we're working with the chest. So that's pericardium 6. The other thing about this point, which if you experience nausea with chemotherapy, this is often used for nausea. So the other reason I'm bringing this up with anxiety is because sometimes anxiety is affecting your stomach and causing this sort of fluttery, bubbly type feeling. This is very helpful to just settle the stomach. So it's not just it's one of these points that's on the pericardium channel, but it's reaching broadly out beyond just its domain of only the pericardium. So because we're talking about anxiety, this would definitely be one where, depending on how anxious I was feeling, I would be holding it and then really deliberately knowing that this is a chest opening point, be taking a breath that fills my belly, but then also is really filling up and expanding into my chest. And maybe if I was laying on my back, I might do something where I'm paying attention to my back ribs. I'm laying on my back and saying, okay, can I feel my back ribs expand as I'm breathing out? A lot of times we sort of focus on, is our belly going up and down? If we can get our breath air cool. But you can really pay attention to, is the space between all of your ribs expanding in the front or in the back during your breathing, so that it's you're taking the energetic of the point that's sort of built in, right? But you're connecting your intention of using it to the point itself to activate it a little bit, right? You're not just relying on the point to do something magical, but you're saying, this is what I want to create in my body. I want to create expansion in my chest. And so then you take that attention to your body, to your breath, and see if you can facilitate a little bit of it. And anytime you're doing that, hang out for 5 breaths or something and see if I do this 5 times, can I change? Can I bring a little bit of a state of change to my body through direct pressure and some focus? So I would use this point if this is just going to segue over to abdomen type issues for a second. And I would use this point if there was stomach upset. So broadly, stomach and above, we have belching, gas, nausea, vomiting, that's stomach. Intestines and below, we've got gas the other direction, diarrhea, constipation, stuff like that. So pericardium 6 is good for stomach and above. By the time we get into digestive function, lower down in the intestines, it's a little bit less a little less useful. But if it's stomach activated, like your stomach is upset, it's a useful point. How are we doing? Any questions? No? Okay. Is the way I'm going about this useful for people? Like, are you staying awake? Do we need to slap each other a little bit more? We're good? Okay. Okay. So the next place I thought I'd go to would be talking a little bit about, let's talk about digestion a little bit. So digestion is, like there's a lot in acupuncture land that can deal with digestion. Funny thing is, for having channels that connect to all of these different digestive organs, like the stomach and the large intestine and the small intestine, most of our digestive points are on the spleen channel, which, like, in Western anatomy and physiology, you don't really look at the spleen as having a lot to do with digestion, but in Chinese medicine, it's big. We've got to deal with the spleen channel and the stomach channel, and then the third one may be the large intestine. So I'm just going to show you where those are, and I'm going to show you my legs again. So the inside of the leg here, if you follow your, so again, we're working the same thing, right? We've got 12 channels. There's 3 on the inside, 3 on the outside, 3 on the inside, 3 on the outside. So our 3 on the inside here are kidney. Well, it's confusing there. I'm gonna go up here. Spleen, liver, kidney. So the spleen channel starts at your big toe and it goes up, right behind your shin bone on the inside. And that, again, just knowing that from your big toe up through here, if you have digestive issues going on that primarily have to do with a difficulty with digestion, a sort of like diarrhea, or your digestive energy is not very strong, like food doesn't go in very easily or it doesn't get digested easily, chances are we need to work on the spleen organ. So you can do the sort of thing that I was saying where you just palpate up through here with your thumb, and if you find something right behind your shin bone that feels sore, stop there and hang out for a minute. I'll tell you a couple places that tend to be pretty sore for people. One is right behind your big toe, right in here. That's often pretty sore for people, especially if there's any sort of blood sugar issues going on. This is a pretty important point. This is called spleen 3, because 1 is here at the toe nail, 2 is on that side of the joint, and 3 just hops over it. So see how it's following that same set of rules? This is, here's a little dip in the creek, right? It just went up, and there you can feel like a little tiny hole type of feeling in there. That's an acupuncture point. So that's spleen 3, and then it moves along here and goes up behind here. Now, as you travel up, the other way you might find an acupuncture point, if you're just rubbing your fingers along, I mean, this doesn't look like it has a lot of dips or crevices, but sometimes as you travel up, you might notice, wait, it's even, and then your fingers like sink into something. You're like, what's there? What's that thing? Well, that's an acupuncture point too, called spleen 6, which is very important and contraindicated if you're pregnant, which I think we're, most of us, safely out of that phase of life, if ever. Okay, so spleen 6, very useful point. And it's one of those where if you were just drawing your finger up, you'd be like, oh, I found a groove. There's my groove. Find your groove, you can rub on it. Spleen 6 is very useful for many, many things. And you would not go wrong to just give yourself a little bit of a massage there. The last place I'm just going to orient you to on the spleen channel, this is if things feel sluggish. We call it damp, heavy, if you're having a hard time metabolizing fluids, or if you have fluid accumulation, this is spleen 9. Again, it's following the same rules, except for instead of going down a waterfall, we're traveling upstream and we go up, 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 and then, oh, we hit this little funny divot because it's where your bone starts to splay out a little bit before it joins the patella. So you're going and you're going, you can't go any further because there's a little change in the terrain there. So that's spleen 9. That is usually sore on people. You don't really have to have anything wrong with you for that to be a sore point. And that is just a wonderful point to rub, especially, like I said, if you have any fluid retention. So that would be a point that I would use for somebody who's working with edema, right? Lymphedema, I would use that point regardless of where the edema is. It's on the arms, fine, we're still using spleen 9. And especially if there's like digestive weakness, and like especially digestive weakness that shows up around like digesting cold foods or certain kinds of foods. So that's the spleen channel. Those are really the 3 most important points. Like if you're going to be using the spleen channel, chances are people are going to be either using spleen 3, spleen 6, or spleen 9. And the simplest way to do it, really, I mean, you just take your palm and you can just squeeze up the inside of your calf. And you're probably going to feel when you get to spleen 6, oh, that point's a little sore. So you spend a little more time there. And you just go up, oh, spleen 9, and then you give it a little bit of an extra rub. I'm going to show you my other knee instead. All right, so now we're going to hop back over to the stomach channel. Do you remember this one, stomach 36? Yep, so that's the one we karate chopped, right? So this is a really important point that in our textbooks we talk about it being useful for immune system, useful for stomach. Some sources will say it's useful for helping the stomach secrete stomach acid. On that, some teachers have said, oh, it helps people secrete stomach acid, so if someone has acid reflux, don't use it. But I use it a lot for people because the other function is that it builds up energy. It's in so many point combinations. If you look at research about acupuncture as being useful for XYZ thing, chances are the researchers have used stomach 36 because it's just like, it's pretty much the biggest point. It's a big one. So stomach 36, without a doubt, if you have stomach pain, I'll just use it. So the way I'm using it here, I kind of bring my hand over, I find it with my fingers. And one of the ways I find it is that I'm rolling over, I don't know if you feel that muscle, the tibialis anterior. It's the one that can get kind of tight sometimes. So I'll like rub back and forth, and there's a certain place as I'm feeling for a point. It's like not on the backside, not closer to the shin, but right kind of in the middle on the line of the muscle. I feel it's like, oh yeah, there's something kind of juicy there. I don't know if you have that experience. But basically at the point where you feel a little bit of like a heavy, achy, something's there, I can feel it with my fingers, feel it in my leg. That's your spot. So I might rub it back and forth just because of the angle. What you want to do is just find something. Now, some people, depending on where it is, some people might find that using like a pen is useful. I'm a really like tactile person, and so I want to feel it with my fingers because I'm getting feedback from my fingers. Like, is there the point? No, I'm feeling for something. But if you feel like, yeah, this feels like a good spot for me, and your hand's getting kind of sore, you can just use something like the end of a pen, maybe not the pokey side, but the broad side, to just keep a little bit of stimulation on that. The only other buddy that I would say for the stomach is it's downstairs neighbor, stomach 37. is a point that's relevant for the intestines. And so the same way we found stomach 36 with the hand breath, we just leapfrog down another hand breath and that's stomach 37. And that point can be pretty sore when there's like intestinal dysbiosis, or like if you have, like gassy things going on, sometimes with constipation. Actually, definitely with constipation, I would use this point. If it's a kind of diarrhea that's happening because there's something that like your body really, really needs to get out and really doesn't like, I might use this point. If it's the diarrhea that your body is just not digesting food very well, I'd stick more with spleen channel points. But again, you don't have to have anything wrong for these points to be just kind of achy or sore once you start working on them. And the other thing that I want to just bring up about the stomach channel is that its main direction should be going down. Like we have this idea that the chi in the channel is moving in a direction. And so the stomach channel starts actually right up by your eye, and it travels down, 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 down before it ends on the second toe. So if we want to just facilitate the movement of digestion easily through the system, you can just take your hand and like do a brushing technique, right? Where you could take something like, you could take a rolling pin, honestly, and roll down like that, where you're just stimulating that channel with a rolling movement. Because really we want stomach energy to be going down. You don't want stomach energy to be going up. That doesn't feel good. That's stomach 36. The last, so does that kind of answer some questions around abdominal pain? Like, I don't think if somebody was having abdominal pain and it was related to digestion, I don't think for acupressure, it might feel good to like give your belly a nice rub, just sort of a calming rub, but I don't think I do a lot of acupressure specifically on the belly itself. I'd really stick to places like pericardium 6 or the stomach or spleen points. So
Any questions, anybody?
Yeah, anybody have questions? How are we doing with this?
Yes, Carol,
Yep,
you're muted.
you're muted. Oh, can't hear you, Carol. Can you unmute?
And while she's unmuting, someone also asked about
I got it.
tight hamstrings. So
Okay, sorry. Were you going to say something, Carol?
I had trouble unmuting. Is it possible for you to send us a chart that shows these spots and what they do? And
Yeah. I'm glad, I had some points that I had in mind, but we're detouring from what I had in mind anyway. So I'm happy to send the points along that are actually what we're doing. So far we've talked about P6, 5, 3.
yeah, just send them to me and then I'll send them to everybody.
Sure. Okay.
That has attended tonight. So
Great. So how are we doing? Does anybody need like a water break? We want to have a chat break. Are people feeling like with it good?
okay. Yeah, and then somebody asked about anything for tight hamstrings.
Stretch.
Yeah.
Stretch. And also consider that the fascial plane that starts at your heel, like really the fascial plane that goes through here goes all the way back, all the way up to here. So forward folds are helpful for that whole fascial plane, right? But then if you want to sort of activate that plane a little bit, you could get one of those little nubbly cylinders and roll it on the bottom of your foot. Or like you can use a rubber racquetball, right? And get a little bit of like pressure onto specific. You will feel points if you put pressure from a racquetball or for something like a foam roller onto those points. And that's going to be a much more useful thing to do with stretching and pressure from something like a foam roller than to only do acupressure to it. Especially because it's a little like, it's dense musculature, it's big, it's heavy. And to really get your fingers in there, it's a little bit of a, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for a massage therapist. So the best thing to do really is going to be to stretch, right? Those muscles need to be stretched out. Yeah. Sorry, that's probably not the answer somebody wanted. Magical points. I mean, the other thing just to think about, okay, so let me put this into Chinese medicine acupuncture channel terms, which is to say that the bladder channel goes down, well, it starts here at the inner, what's called the inner canthus of the eye. It zips running, racing stripes over the back of the head, and then it goes down the back in a line and then does a magical thing and hops out for another victory lap a little bit farther out, and then goes all the way down the back of your legs into the back of the knee, and it ends up here at bladder 67. It's the longest channel. It's got 67 points. So the place where it is on the angle here, it's going along the back. I mean, the thing about the bladder channel, and so we talked about the stomach channel, which is this front one here. The gallbladder channel gets this whole side to itself, and the bladder channel gets the whole back to itself. So as channels, they end up taking up, like, they have kind of a lot of real estate in terms of the width of their channel in the muscle sense. So if you're working on something like your hamstrings and they're really tight, I would think, okay, well, that's on the bladder channel. So we want to work maybe down in here at the base of your ankle, right? But the back side of it, and then down through the foot along the edge of it. So you might, you know, pinch your heel a little bit just to kind of loosen up the tendon attachments there. Again, following those same rules, which are that chi is going to get stuck at flexi joints. And so you can find something in those, what? Oh, it's a crevice, right? It's a deep little pool right behind your ankle. Like it's following its own rules, right? It's following the rules of that body, which are that here, you just want to slide your thumb right into it. And that, I mean, it's at a flexi joint and it's a deep pool. Follows the rules, right? But it's the point that's on the bladder channel, which is the channel that courses through the back of the legs. So I might work there, or you could find something up here in the knee pit, as you might call it, the popliteal crease. Another hingy joint, right? Stick your thumb back in there. Yeah, there's a place. So those are places where the muscles are connecting into tendons, connecting into bones. And if you give those a little bit of, like, you know, rub and loosening up, this one for that matter, you might want to give a little bit of padding, right? So you could do something where you're, I actually like this as a Qigong practice. I do a lot of like padding like this. Down, and I pat up the insides of my legs. And then I might pat down the back sides of my legs. Right? And then pat up the insides like that. So that's just taking the same idea, using stretch, but using that padding and following the trajectory of the channels.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So when you're padding, you're going down and up?
Yeah, the way, you know, you don't have to be too worried about it, but the way I think about it is the inside channels of your legs, they start, remember how we did like kidney 1 right here? And spleen 1 here? And then liver 1 here? They start here and they go up the inside. So their direction of traffic is from the foot up into the torso. Whereas the stomach the gallbladder, the bladder, they start up on the head, stomach, gallbladder, bladder. They go over, gallbladder and bladder go over, stomach goes down. And so those ones, I tend to want to just like go with the current of them. So on the sides and the back of the body, I brush or pat down. Whereas on the insides of the legs, I brush or pat up. So like when you're doing something like lymph drainage massage and you want to bring your lymph fluid from your groin or from your legs, you're doing a little bit of it, you're flushing it up into the body at the level of the groin. But that's on the interior part of the legs, right? That's like in this area. But when we're working here or on the back, that all can go down. Does that make sense?
How about sinuses? I use a lot of pressure stuff for sinuses these days.
Yeah. So we could just segue over into head related things. Does that sound good?
Okay.
So I'm going to use the same idea here, okay? And this is great that we're talking about this. So we've just talked about a gallbladder channel. Again, this is like the one where it's like, why are you treating my gallbladder on my forehead? I'm like, that's not where it is. So the gallbladder channel, a really good thing to just know about the gallbladder channel is that its main region is like side body, okay? So it starts here, and then it goes and it zigzags and it zags and it zigs and it zags. And then it goes into there and onto your shoulder. And then it zigs and zags over your ribs and then down your hip, down the side of your leg, like the IT band, and then down to the fourth toe. So it's all a side body. That's one kind of headache, right? You think of like the temporal headaches or like migraines. It's one kind of headache. But then there's the kind of headache that's in the front. And the front of the head and the sinuses, the stomach channel starts here, right? It starts right, like directly below your pupil. That's actually the reference point. And the large intestine channel ends right next to your nose, the nose wings. So this is one of those times where like they're neighboring channels. So the chi of one channel stopped here and then it hopped right up to here and then started and continued its way on the other one. So when we're working on this front sinus area, right, that region is very well controlled by this point here that we talked about just briefly up on the top of this little hill called large intestine 4. And this point is probably the one that like most people know is like the headache point. Is anybody familiar with that? Little nods here and there. Here's what I find. This is a fantastic point for frontal head pain, especially sinus pain. Because the channel goes right up through here and it ends up on the side of the nose and it governs the front of the face. But when headaches are over here or you feel something back here, sometimes this point is relevant and sometimes it's not. So if it's the only point you know for headaches, it's like kind of a problem, right? Like when I have a headache, sometimes this point works and sometimes it's not doing anything for me. So that's why I want to teach you guys a couple of different things, really using the same idea of regions. So if you know that like this traveling on that side of the body is for frontal head pain, that makes sense. Well, what happens if we go onto the side? Well, then we need to use points that are on the side, like middle, right? So the middle part of this arm, this is large intestine, and then this is the triple heater. And the triple heater, which goes to the fourth finger, is the upstairs neighbor of the gallbladder channel, basically. Everything that is on the lower legs is mirrored on the limbs, just with different names. So this middle one that goes up the middle of the arm, it ends up over here. So if there's pain on the side of the head, maybe you have sinus congestion, but maybe you actually have like a headache that's on the temples, then I would be using points that are going to follow that trajectory, which are much more like, if I were, okay, here's my arm. If things are on the side, I'm going to be feeling through the middle of the extensors and seeing if there's anything relevant in my body through there. And again, using that idea that the points farthest away from the source of pain are the most strong for treating it, it's between the fourth and fifth fingers. you might find something between there, and that can be really good for side of the head pain. Do you feel any tenderness in there, Pat? Anything? A little bit? So this is the organ that we talk about here. This is called Sanjiao, which means triple heater, 3 heaters. And so that's that, like, here's one, there's the middle, and there's the lower, right? This is sort of like a unifying energy that transports heat and fluid throughout the different cavities of our body. That's what the Sanjiao is. And so this is its channel here. But mostly when I'm using it, I'm not thinking about that like 3 regions of the body. I'm thinking, oh, they've got like TMJ or tight jaw stuff, or maybe they've got ear pain, or maybe they have a migraine. And I'm using this because this is a really good set of points or regions for side of the head pain, for ears. So again, we're following those same rules, right? If this is where the channel ends, oh, it's a divot, right? There it is. Waterfall's coming down and it hit a little place here to pool, kind of tender spot. Let's follow. Oh, here's a crevice. It's a point where 2 bones meet. This is where the metacarpal is, and then it joins the sort of bony parts of your hand. And here's your other metacarpal. In between those, right in there before it hits the big bones, it's like triple heater 3. So these are usually pretty tender if you've got side of the head pain, but they can also just be tender if you don't. So if you had sinus pain, I would use large intestine 4, because that's most likely going to go up to the front of the sinuses. What's up, Richie? Oops, we said bye. Okay, bye, Richie. Last thing, the karate chop point here, small intestine 3, we were using that to connect with the stomach channel when we were chopping on our legs. This is the one that goes whoop over through the shoulder blade and back up the back of the neck. So if you were having neck pain or back of the head kind of headache, I might use this one because it governs more of the back side of the body, back side of the neck. Does that make sense, Lynn? Yeah, okay. So, so regions, there's like, sometimes people are like, how do you know where these points are? And like, I mean, I didn't figure them out. Like some dudes 2,000 years ago figured it out because they were Taoists and they hung out in caves. I don't know what they were doing, but they figured out some cool stuff, but they charted out some patterns that like, they follow along a pattern. So if you can kind of track, okay, this is on the side or this is in the front, and then you map it onto its region. Okay, this is for front, this is for side, this is for back. Okay, right? This is for heart, this is for pericardium, this is for lung. And then you go through and find it. It's like, oh, this is my spot. And if I rub on that and I can take a deep breath, I think that this is helping me breathe better, right? And then you come up with your own understanding of like, yeah, okay, this, like when I rub on this, what does your body do? You might notice your own sort of energetic. I rub this point and it really helps me feel this way. And that, I mean, I think there's something really cool about that because these guys, when they made the books, they didn't have somebody telling them all the stuff, right? They're just, I think they're following, my best guess is one, they're like very adept, intuitive, energetic oriented people. And the other thing is that they're probably just listening to their bodies and following some of these rules. Like if we poke around on muscle bodies, we find tender spots. And if we poke around in little crevices, we're going to find something too. So they're just kind of like body game hunters. They know predictable places to find the different kind of creatures that they're looking for. So the last thing I just want to show you are a couple places on your feet. And this is for pain. If we're just talking about pain broadly, this point here, liver 3, is really, it's really important for all sorts of pain. And the way that you find liver 3, it's between the first and the second toe. And as you're going up towards, again, it's like we'll see how the structure is the same as your hand. See how we did this? We found the kind of muscly prominence between the thumb and the forefinger, the first finger, and that was large intestine 4. Let's do the same thing. Here's the first and the second toe, and we find the space between them. Instead of there being a bulgy muscle, this is more of the sort of depression between two structures. So we're walking up a little gorge here, and we found a little spot to have a picnic. And this is a nice spot. Sometimes people feel things closer to the web. Again, this is a totally legit point. This is liver 2. Sometimes you might find a little bit of tenderness closer up to the bone, and that is actually, that is where mine is. I don't know where yours is, but mine is at this higher location of liver 3. So you could find pretty much anywhere along here. If you find something tender, it's worth pushing on. And this one, instead of rubbing it back and forth, my liver 3 doesn't really want that right now. It just wants nice, steady pressure. And so I'm going to bring another point to how we do acupressure, which is pay attention to where you're holding tension. Pay attention to the tension. So what I will do when I'm in an acupressure moment is I'll hold that spot, and then I'm just going to do a quick little scan on myself. Like, what muscle am I clenching right now? And I might take a breath in, and then as I'm breathing out, okay, I'm actually really tight in my hips. Okay, so I'm just going to relax that for a sec. I was actually tight in my chest, I didn't know it. Tight in my belly. Holding tension in my leg. And now I'm even. So using that point, also, now that I've done that and I've released tension in those 3 places, that spot is not tender on me anymore. I don't know. So using the point gives you a sort of wowza to focus on, a place that you can reference as you go through your sort of a quick little body scan. Am I holding tension anywhere? The reason I'm bringing up liver 3 is because it's really good for pain that comes from tension. So tension from, neck tension, muscle tension from stress, from holding, any of those patterns. Liver 3, this is a very, very good one. The other thing about, then this traces back over to digestion, is that sometimes digestion is worse because we're tense, right? Like we're anxious or whatever. And so if your digestion is worse because you're tense, then using liver 3 is very useful for that. So, does anybody have questions on liver 3? Just talk about it as a chi moving point. So it doesn't really matter where the pain is. You can, if there's tension and a feeling of I want things to move, but they're not moving, this is a good point for it.
I'm confused about this liver 3 thing. What are we actually doing? Is this for the scan? I'm confused.
So sorry, the reason I'm saying doing a scan is because as you're sitting with your hand on your foot, you're probably going to be holding and engaging a couple of different muscles to keep you in this position. But when you're doing something like acupressure, you want to be engaging as few muscles as possible, right? And it gives you a chance to just see where am I holding tension? It's a little awkward to get your foot up, right? So if you're holding on like this and you're okay, I'm trying to make myself feel less tense, right? That's not, you're not going to feel less tense holding it like that. So it gives you an opportunity to see, all right, do I have tension? Where do I have tension? Because this is a point that is about tension that gets stored in your body. And so it's a good opportunity to check in and see where that tension is if you're not already aware of it. Sometimes, it hangs out in weird places. You might not be aware of it, but you've actually got your hand clenched up in a fist or something, right? You're just wanting to do a little bit of a scan just to check in, just to notice. You could do that on any of the points. It's not specific to liver 3, but if you're doing liver 3 and you're also tense, you're not going to be doing yourself any favors by staying tense, right? Just a good time to kind of let it go a little bit. Does that make sense? Liver 3 is really, it's another like big point that's included in a lot of point prescriptions, in part because it helps move energy around, and then also the relationship that it has to reproductive anatomy. The liver channel is very useful for like its influence on the reproductive system, like, and the whole like movement of energy in the pelvic region. So yeah, we've covered a lot of things. I kind of
Wow.
want to take a break from the me divulging information and just open it up to like, let's sort through some of this Q&A, talk it out, see what's coming up for people.
First of all, I just want to thank you that was fabulous.
Thanks. That was without a presentation. It's better to just like talk to people. But I will send pictures.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Sadie?
Or just talk. You know, you don't have to have specific questions about one thing or another. Just open up the floor to chat.
Yes,
I
Diane.
have to leave, but thank you very much.
Okay. Have a good night, Carol.
Thanks.
You're
Bye.
muted, Diane.
I was just saying, you haven't said anything about neuropathy, and you had mentioned.
Yes. Yeah. So here's what we're going to say about neuropathy. So thank you for bringing that up again. So neuropathy, my experience with treating neuropathy has been that when I am working with people who are actively in chemotherapy and are on a regimen that is known to cause neuropathy, and we get started early, a lot of times we can sort of like mitigate the damage before it gets done. When I've worked with people who've had neuropathy for a year or more, it's hard. And that's what it's hard with acupuncture. And acupuncture is acupuncture interacts with your body's neurotransmitter system, your nervous system, differently than acupressure does, because you're putting something in to the body, right? It sends out a whole cascade of responses that happen specifically because you're getting close to nerves and you're introducing a foreign object that your immune system has to respond to, right? It's a benign object, it's sterile, it's not going to really hurt you, but your immune system still has to respond to it. So they have different effects, and in some ways acupuncture can be more effective for certain things. For some things, acupressure is actually just as good and can be much more calming than acupuncture. For neuropathy, I don't have a lot of experience having people only use acupressure to deal with it. And it may be less effective, I'm not sure, to do it with acupressure compared to acupuncture, in part because you are not, because of those little mechanisms that I'm talking about. So I just want to say all these caveats that kind of make me sound like a Debbie Downer. I'm sorry. But I also just want to be really like clear about what to expect from it, because on the one hand, acupressure is so cool if you like know some of these pathways in your body, you can connect, right? Like, oh, here's this thing. But I don't want to set it up as like, this can solve everything. What I will tell you is that if I'm doing acupressure, you see these little webby spots? Again, we're following actually exactly the same rules. So the webby spots between your fingers here, how enticing does this sound? I would stick needles in those. So if I were doing if I'm doing acupuncture on somebody who has, and I'm just going to use my hands for demonstration, I'm taking the needles and I'm going here, and I'm going like right, I don't know if you can see that needle, I'm going right into the space between the fingers there. And so I would use all 4 of those points here, 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 and all 4 of those on both hands. That has only one point name, it's called Bashya. So it's 8 points that are actually called one point. And those are the points that I use. Now sometimes, and so what you can do to reenact that, depending on how long your nails are, you can kind of stick your fingers between there and get a little bit of a stimulation into those points. And so that would be like, one of the situations, because we're wanting to wake up the nervous system here, right? So this isn't necessarily one where you're wanting to like put yourself into a nice, like rosy state of mind. You're actually wanting to create a little bit of stimulation. It might not be super comfortable, but we're wanting to get nervous system activity happening in those joints. And so that would just be like a little bit of rubbing, like get pressure in there. So those are best, those are the points that I always use. And then on the feet, it's the same thing. It's just between the toes. Yeah.
There's some students at Cornell that are working on gloves that put neuron stimulation in there.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Like right into those same areas?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. How long, Diane, how long have you had neuropathy?
A year.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I said that thing. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so that's not to say, I mean, it's like, I've seen people get treated and they're like, what this does is it helps it keep from getting worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And sometimes also it gets a little bit better. It becomes a little bit less obnoxious.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would use those points. And the other thing I would do would be to like, just to keep the stimulation happening on your feet using something like one of those little rolly tools that has the little nubble type thing, so that you're activating the nerves by giving them input, which the thing is when you have neuropathy, you don't want it, right? It's like it feels sensitive and you don't want that. But on the feet, we would be working like not just between the toes here, but maybe even under the toes, like in this kind of area.
I'm okay on my toes. It's just
the
bottom of the feet.
Oh, the bottom of your feet.
Yeah.
So if it's just the bottom of your feet, then I would really work kidney 1 and I would work the heel.
Okay.
So we talked about, remember how we divided the foot into thirds and we said there's kidney 1 there. Well, if you look at the other third, kind of at the end of the darker part, that's your heel, you could do a lot of work in there too.
Okay.
And then the other thing I'm going to bring over to is this idea of where you take a body part and you sort of map it onto another body part. And it sounds kind of far out. I like to think about it's like my Barbie arm theory, like if you just pluck off Barbie's arm and you flip it this way and you flip it that way, you can imagine that this is kind of like the foot. And so if we're working on the foot, like when people have plantar fasciitis and their heel is really tender, I don't want to go stick a needle in their heel. That sucks. Like that hurts. And the skin's really tough. So you start working around on your palm, and would not be surprised if you find some points in your palm that are going to mirror either across the body on the opposite side or sometimes on the same side, the same kind of discomfort, or at least in a sort of similar location, a weird feeling that you would have. So if you work on your feet and that kidney 1 spot and then the lower point that I was mentioning, and then you're checking out on your palm something, imagining that this is the heel and this is that ball of your foot, give yourself some really good deep pressure in through your palm and stimulate it. And there's a connection that happens there between the fingers and the hands and the feet. It's really common that I've treated so many people's plantar fasciitis with these points. They'd rather have hand points than heel points. So I would use the same technique probably if we're working just on foot. Is it on the bottom of your foot, or is it more on like the tops of the foot?
No, the bottom.
The bottom, yeah. Yeah, so keep stimulating it and then find things on the opposite limbs and see if you can find, get a little purchase on it. And yeah, the bottom line is like, if you find something that's tender, just poke it. It's like great last words from Sadie Hayes, right? I mean, that's my job. I poke around, like I touch people. I'm like, is this tender? Is this tender? Oh, I found a tender spot. I'm going to stick a needle in that. That's a weird job. Right?
But we're thankful to have you.
but you can find out a lot of good stuff, right? It's pretty amazing when you start to find those things.
Do some exploring.
Yeah, that is exactly the spirit, Diane. Like, to me, that's exactly the spirit. Like, you are built into this amazing landscape that has hills and valleys. It has these little glens and like mountaintops, and you just like go explore that landscape with the same sort of freshness of like, what's here today, right? And then you find a place that you really like, and you're like, this is one of my favorite spots. Like, I like to come here every day. We hang out and we observe like what's going on. And you notice from day to day, if you do you have a little bit of a routine and you give yourself some care there. Like, yeah, yesterday and the 3 days before it was really sore, but after working on it for 3 days, it's not the same anymore.
Yeah.
So there's something cool about that, right? You get to know your body terrain in a way that's just like going to your favorite picnic spot in a park.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. So thank you guys so much. I think, are we supposed to be done at 7? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I get dinner pretty soon.
Yeah.
I think
Dinner
that's
for
why
me
we
too.
lost a few, but
Yeah.
it was really, really great information.
I got
So,
some good notes and I can research everything I've done here, and maybe I'll go over the tape again, the recording.
Yeah, and the other
Very
thing, maybe I'll send like another, like a link or something. Thanks, Lynn.
yeah.
To because you can find pictures online, if I say
Yeah.
Sanjiao or Triple Heater 3 and you're like, where was that again? Or you're like, there's tons of websites that have all of these points listed on them. So I did not pick the most exotic ones. I'm sorry to say. I stuck with the kind of the big dudes.
That's what I liked about your presentation. It was all fundamental stuff that we can use, we can apply it. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
You've got my email, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
Oh, thank you,
Okay.
Sadie.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah. And it, like, not even related to this, like if it's like a month from now or something, you're like, oh, I had a question about, blah, 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 blah. Like, yeah, shoot me an email. Usually within a couple days.
Great. Yeah.
Okay.
She's very responsive, I will tell you that. So,
Yeah. Well,
thank you so much,
Thanks,
Sadie.
Monica. I appreciate seeing you guys all. It's so nice. Kind of great opportunity. So thank you.
And what a great presentation. So,
Thanks.
and
Well,
I have several people that weren't able to attend tonight, and they were looking forward to